written on these key topics. Merci.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. So I'm really pleased to kick off the conference with a session on social connectivity, social ties, social connections. Are they in decline? Question mark. And what are the economic consequences of that? So actually, we have three speakers. The first I suggest will be Jan, who's going to present more of a macro perspective on how do social support, how do social connections, social links, what do they look like today here in Europe and then also in the US? How does it differ? And then he will show us like high-level patterns about social support and political attitudes, life satisfaction. So we'll get a sort of macro view on the importance of social support, social connections, and how they have evolved over time. Then next we will have Aparijita, who's a graduate from Wharton and coming close to Paris, joining INSEAD as an assistant professor. And she will give us some insights into her work on the importance of social relations to entrepreneurship, to digital platforms. So she has some really interesting work on how social connections, social relationships actually matter to the success of digital platforms and community entrepreneurship, particularly in emerging economy settings. So, and last but not least, we will have Charles, who's a founder and CEO of Lulu dans ma rue, who I've interacted with many, many times, and every time when I meet Charles, I am blown away by what he does. And in particular, Lulu dans ma rue is basically a digital platform that connects households with household service providers locally, and in fact, it's about social ties. It is a lot about creating connectivity locally across different types of groups. So I've always been so interested in what you do, and I'm so very happy that you're part of this panel because you're going to bring us from the macro into something very micro, very human. And so with all that, I'm going to try to keep it very short because we really do want to welcome interaction. So I'll try to, 15 minutes if you can, just a teaser of, some of your work, and then please prepare questions for after then. We will have time for Q&A. Okay, so then I'll welcome Jan, who I should say is my colleague at HEC. He's the Dean of Pre-Experience Programs and Professor of Economics. Okay.
Non, pas trop. And so it's my pleasure to be here. I'm an economist by training, but you know how economists work. They copy everything other disciplines do. So this is exactly what I will do today, and I will share with you some quantitative evidence about the link between social connectiveness and political polarization. I will share with you some work that I will summarize in one slide to a certain extent. It's something that we have done with the World Happiness Report. So the World Happiness Report is something that now is published every year. Governments are really keen on looking at how they compare between each other. And this is a partnership with Oxford, with Harvard also, and with Princeton, because we are working with the Gallup data at the individual level. And so it was really the occasion, the opportunity to contribute to this report by having a specific focus on social connectedness and polarization. And I would just show you the granularity of the data and what we can do with that, because we were able typically to look, when you are talking about social links, we really want to have something really concrete, okay, behind this. And precisely with the Gallup, we were able to look at a simple thing, which was the the shared meals, okay, by people every day. What is the frequency with which, for instance, you will have dinner alone during the week or last day, okay? And I just give you one insight. The first one is that there is a strong link between life satisfaction and the number of meals that you have shared per week. Okay, so there is a really increasing. The life satisfaction scales is between 1 to 10. The higher the score, the higher the life satisfaction, and you really see a strong correlation between the two. Same thing with positive affect and negative affect. Okay, the negative you decrease the number of negative affect. And let's look really at this figure. I think it's really striking, where you can measure. So with the American Time Use Survey, the percentage of people who dine alone measure the share of respondents in each survey year reporting eating all meals alone in the previous day. Okay, and there has been a really sharp increase in the US, actually almost doubling during this period. And I think it tells a lot about the main trend that we see in the US, but also in all Western European countries, where first life satisfaction decrease, which is a big reversal. And Angus Deaton, I don't know if you have read his book, which is really inspiring, Death of Despair, who has a big insight on that. Same thing in Western Europe now, and especially for the youth and the elderly, which is a really new socialized fact. And I just show you two additional figures that I think really striking is the share of people who distrust others in the US. So it really rings a bell with, you know, there was a book, Bullying Alone by Bob Putman, a sociologist and a political scientist in the US, where showing that in the US you are so lonely that even when you go to bullying, now you go alone, okay? And you can really show at the level of interaction of people, when you ask them, do you trust each other? So actually, it's decreased from 50% to an average of 30% in 2020. Same thing when you look at some additional statistics, and for instance, do you have someone that you can count on if you have a big problem? I mean, the big issue is not the issue, I think, of poverty or of level of your income, is whether or not it's the issue of risk. Can you actually do you have enough money if you have an unexpected expense to do? Or can you count on someone if you have a big crisis in your life? And those statistics also decrease in our in the US and in our Western European countries. And what the claim here is to look also at the political consequences of this. What we try to develop in different papers and different books, especially a book with our Mr. Daniel Cohen, a book that I wrote with him, The Origins of Populism, is the fact that you really need to take into account those kind of subjective variables if you want to understand the polarization. Why? Because there's been a lot of papers, especially by Norris and Ingler, trying to understand the rise of populism by having a traditional struggle between economic variables, whether or not there are economic risks and things like that. And obviously, you do have those kind of variables. Or is it explained by a rise of a cultural backlash, especially the elderly who want to go back to the traditional values and things like that? The big issue with those traditional explanations, the first thing is that when you try really to understand the rise of populism or anti-system votes, and you use traditional ideologies, religion, classes, social, actually you explain not that much, okay? And there's, just take what's happening. The anti-system vote now is quite ubiquitous, both in the upper classes, in the low classes, among men, among women. I mean, there's obviously you might find some heterogeneity, but you capture really less with traditional variables. And you cannot explain some important puzzle. For instance, why do the poor vote for anti-redistributive policies in Europe and in the US? When you see the level of risk and economic inequality, I mean, it should be, Mélenchon should be actually a president since 10 years, okay? But it's not the case. People do not vote for Thomas Piketty, and they do not vote for Mélenchon. And they do not vote for Sanders, okay, in the US. So how can we explain this? And the simple message that I would like to share with you is that we really need this simple message, which is the following. In post-industrial societies, in societies where individuals are much more alone, they are alone at work. Okay, it's no longer the case that they are working in big factories. Obviously, we still have factories. We have a representative of Michelin here. We have big factories still, but now in society of services, the share of people who are working alone has increased a lot. You are alone in territories. You are alone on the social network. And so there is people really react much more in terms of affects, in terms of emotions. If you take the Yellow Vest movement, what people had in common in the Yellow Vest, I mean, they were not workers at Michelin or at Renault or things like that. What they have in common was really this feeling of resentment, of indignation, of anger. And I show you just one example what we are doing with someone. I mean, Stephanie Stancheva, I really encourage you to look at the work she's doing. We have just launched a survey with Stephanie where we show the power of emotions. That emotion explains much more your vote, okay, with a causal identification. But I just give you some example. With Stephanie, we look at all the level of emotion in all the conversation on social media. And you can see actually here that anger has almost doubled among the conversation when you look at the followers, okay, the users. But when you look at the official Democrat and Republican accounts, it's the same thing. Anger has increased a lot, and rational discourse, which is this one, has decreased. Same thing here. Over the period, the rational discourse based on facts has decreased a lot. We analyze millions of conversations, okay? And what we show is that actually the populists really use those feelings, those emotions, to spread even more anti-system votes. That the likelihood to have a retreat, the efficiency of emotional messages are much more important. So this is our basic framework, and then we try to use this to explain the polarization. And I just give you a simple framework of what we are doing. We try to have a simple matrix to rational this in a really in a two diagram. It's a simple paradigm. We show that life satisfaction explains a lot the anti-system votes. Okay? People who feel more and more unsatisfied with life will vote both for the far left or the far right anti-system vote in Western democracy or in the US. But then if you want to understand the split, why is it the case that some people will vote for LFI or for RN in France? Same thing if you look at Germany between for the AfD or the far left. Why do they vote for Trump or for Sanders or these kind of things? You need an additional variable, which is the level of trust in others, okay? And especially when you have a high level of trust, you tend to vote much more for the far left. Why? Because you still believe in another society. You think that you can redistribute because people will be public good, okay? When you have a low life satisfaction but also a low level of trust, you will be much more in the far right anti-system vote. And I just give you some example of this matrix of it works. For instance, I look at satisfaction with democracy in the United States and in Western Europe. And I categorize all the citizens, the population in this Gallup survey, whether or not they have a high life satisfaction and high interpersonal trust. Okay, I'm here. And then depending on whether or not they have a high life satisfaction but a low interpersonal trust, they tend to be much less satisfied with democracy. And those who are really anti-democracy are those who have a low life satisfaction and a low interpersonal trust. Okay? Let's look at one thing that is really interesting is also the attitude towards LGBT, towards immigration, and so on. You see really what really matters is not only to have, for instance, here the two highest negative attitudes, okay, against immigrants, against homosexuality, against others to a certain extent, are people not only who have a low life satisfaction, which is here, but here they have a high interpersonal trust, but those who are really highly unsatisfied and with a low trust are those who tend to be more and more intolerant. And I just show you one additional graph in terms of economic attitudes. If you look, for instance, on redistribution. So do you think that you should reduce income inequality in the US or in Western Europe? Let's take, for instance, this example. Here, so it's still my baseline. If you have a high life satisfaction and a high interpersonal trust, if you have a low life satisfaction but a high interpersonal trust, you tend to be much more pro-redistribution. And typically, those are people who vote for the far left, anti-STEM. They have a low life satisfaction. It's really linked to the economic risk they have to face. They distrust institutions. They think that institutions haven't done such a good job to protect them against the economic risk that we have faced during the last 3 decades. But since they have a high interpersonal trust, they think that we can redistribute. And here, on the contrary, you have people with, even if they have a high life satisfaction, here you have a low life satisfaction, but a low interpersonal trust. They are less prone, especially in the US. And here, even if you have a high life satisfaction, but a low interpersonal trust, you are really anti-redistribution. And I will just show you a simple way we represent the vote, okay, in all the countries. In this simple matrix with life satisfaction and interpersonal trust, so we normalize the average at 0. If you have on the positive side, it means that you are more satisfied than the average population. If you are on the left side, you are less satisfied. And here you have interpersonal trust, okay, and the same explanation. Look, for instance, at the far right and the far left. To a certain extent, both are quite unsatisfied, okay, in their life. And this share of people who are unsatisfied is now the vast majority of citizens. But there are something that really differentiates between the two is that in the Trump vote, AfD, Brexit, whatever, they have really a low level of interpersonal trust. They are below the average. And they don't, it's not the case that they are just anti-immigrants. They even distrust their own family, the neighbors. They think that this is totally different compared to the far left. And then when you look at the center, so the center, for instance, will be here with a high life satisfaction and a high level of trust. But this part is really shrinking in the data. People who are highly satisfied and highly trusting people, it's only like 8% in our data. Okay, so we will explain this increase of anti-system votes and the fact that there is a split between the two and why now this is really the far right anti-system vote that is gaining momentum in all our democracies. And just to conclude, I will go fast on some, I will conclude with a general picture that is quite alarming, but it means that we need to find, and this is why it's great to have also practitioners. I was discussing with the president of Danone who are with increasing social ties for the elderly. I think that those post-industrial societies, the society of isolated individuals, really explain a new paradox, which is the Easterlin paradox. I don't know if you have heard about the Easterlin paradox, the fact that if you compare in a cross-section within a country people who, so the wealthiest people will say that they are more satisfied with their life compared to poor people. But when you look in time variation, the fact that your income increase doesn't increase your level of life satisfaction. And there are many reasons for that. The fact that we revise our expectation, we compare with each other, things like that. But now it's even worse than that. It's not that your level of life satisfaction remains constant over time, whatever the increase of income. The key reversal is that your life satisfaction decreases even when GDP per capita increase. Okay? And this is true in the US, and this is true now in Western European countries, and especially among the youth. The other really puzzle that we have found in those data is that it used to be the case that when you look at life satisfaction, there's a U shape when you are, in terms of depending on your age. When you are young, you are highly satisfied. Then you are really at the bottom when you are in my age, okay? You are totally depressed. But then you think that there is hope because when your kids are out of your home and but there, you catch up your level of life satisfaction. It's no longer the case. Now, the young generation is even more depressed than my generation. And I explained this in this report by precisely the level of connectedness, and I will conclude here. Thank you.
So I propose that you hold your questions, please. I'm sure you'll have many to ask, but you will do that at the very end, so after the 3 presentations. So I'll let you carry the way.
Well, a very good morning to everyone. I am Aparajita Agarwal. Very excited to be here today at the Inclusive Economy Day. Many thanks to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share some insights from my research with you all and learn from a fabulous lineup of speakers today. So I think my presentation kind of extends from Jan's very interesting work in a kind of slightly different dimension, but related. So I'm going to be talking about certain situations and conditions in which social connections have traditionally been considered very important, but yet from the firm's perspective, especially firms targeting low-income rural segments, when might these relationships pose a challenge or constraint, and the considerations that firms need to take into account as they think about their strategy in these low-income markets. Before I dive into the content, just very quickly about myself, Mariki already gave my introduction, but I will be finishing my PhD in the next couple of months at Wharton. Hopefully my committee lets me go. And if that happens, I'll be joining INSEAD, actually in the Singapore campus, but visiting France very often. Before I came to academia, this is my second career. I worked in industry for a long period of time. And a lot of my research interests stem from my work in India, Africa, and a lot of the emerging contexts. So one of the key areas I'm interested in is understanding whether digital firms, digital technologies, and new organizational forms, like platforms that are emerging today, help in creating broader inclusive markets, and the role that institutions, both formal rules, regulations, as well as informal, like social connections that we'll talk about today, to what extent do they shape the role that digital firms play? And then I'm also interested in understanding more downstream outcomes. So if we do indeed create inclusive markets, to what extent do they help shape or improve the human capital and financial performance of marginalized entrepreneurs? And again, the role that entrepreneurs' networks and their social environment might have in that. So in a lot of my work, I focus on developing contexts where large sections of populations are typically excluded. I'm sorry, this is kind of going in. I did not realize if I'm, sorry. Sorry if my slides were different from what I was talking about. I did not realize it so far. So, okay, some of the animations are not working, but that's all right. So what I'm going to be talking about today that forms the backdrop of my study is large sections of populations which remain disconnected from essential services at the last mile. And in these contexts, traditionally, social connections have been really important for firms to reach these last mile customers. So take, for example, Ram. He is a farmer in rural India whom I met during one of my field visits. Ram represents many of villagers in his community who lack access to basic services. They don't have access to a smartphone or technology. And so things that we do very easily through technology today, like accessing financial services or buying products, is difficult for Ram. He has to walk 20, 30 kilometers to do that. And so with the rise of technology, especially in countries like India, if you all are familiar with digital stack, UPI, Aadhaar, digital identity, many firms are now using technology as a way to reach these last mile markets. But the challenge still remains that the link between these two actors is broken because customers like Ram do not have either digital resources or the capability to really consume the services that these firms want to provide. They also often don't trust technology. So one of the customers like Ram told me that I don't know if I push a wrong button on my phone, my money might go somewhere else. I don't know how to use this. And so okay, I'm sorry. Okay, my slides have all got mixed up for some reason. But essentially, what is happening is there was supposed to be a woman here, who's no longer there. But increasingly, agents, the name of the agent here is Suman, who helps establish this missing link between the firm, which I'm calling DigiCo, and Ram. So if you imagine a woman sitting here whose picture is no longer here, what she does is she conducts transactions on her smartphone on Ram's behalf, withdrawing money from his account or buying seeds and fertilizers for him, and also earning an income in that process. And for Ram, that agent Suman becomes the face of the transaction. For him, it doesn't matter which firm is providing these services. He goes on to say that even if I had a phone, I would prefer that Suman does it for me because I rely on her. If something goes wrong, I can knock on her door tomorrow. And so where I'm going with this is talking about this broader phenomenon of agent-based intermediation in emerging markets, where whether it is these agents in India or in Africa, if you know about mobile money services firms, where almost 8.3 million mobile money agents handle $300 billion of cash last year. Even e-commerce companies in Africa are using these last mile agents to connect to customers. And this quote from one of the CEOs rounds it up very well, wherein he says that just digital means to acquire customers is not sufficient because for the underserved, face-to-face interaction builds trust and demonstrates value. So great, these firms are able to scale in these markets, reach last mile customers, and these agents are acting as the face of the firm. But here is the tension that I'm trying to unpack in the work that I'm presenting today, is that while firms might be able to leverage these relationships to reach these last mile customers and scale, what happens when they start shifting their focus to profits, when they start prioritizing profits and seeking returns on the investments that they might have made in the early years to scale? And that is not very obvious, which is what I'm going to talk about. So for this work, I partnered with a digital platform in India. Let's call it DigiCo. This is a social enterprise that provides digital financial services to rural customers. You might not be able to see this, but essentially they have a whole range, a bouquet of services like bank transfers, bill payments, microloans, even agricultural and farming inputs. And they have a fancy app here. But the difference is that the customer is not using that app directly, but going to the agent in their local village who is verifying their identity and doing these transactions on her phone. Now, this firm mainly targeted regions where customers did not have easy alternatives to access these services. And for them, hence, it was a boon, so to say, to have this pretty much at their doorstep. The agents that were working with this firm had obviously multiple motivations why they were doing this job. So of course, they had financial incentives, the money that they were earning as a commission. But a lot of them in my conversations also said that they were motivated by being able to provide these critical services in their village and being recognized for doing something worthwhile for their local community. Now, the firm, in its transition from being a kind of growth-oriented, creating scale at the last mile, at some point of time transitioned to seeking investments, seeking returns on its investments. And so, this is a very busy slide. It had animations, but it's no longer working, but let me walk you through. Essentially, what they did was for a key service on their platform, which I'm going to call DMT, they changed the commission structure. So before the change, the firm used to pay a certain percentage commission to the agent for every transaction that she did. If she did a transaction for 1,000 rupees, she would get, let's say, 0.6% on that. And there was no fee from the customers. But after the change, the firm reduced the commission for the agent, which was one. But they also, interestingly, introduced a fee which the agent had to recover from the customer. Now, this is kind of on one hand, you might see it as a simple change. Firms change their commission structure all the time. But if you kind of unpack the layers here, from the agent's perspective, it was a situation that created a mandatory bargaining circumstance. If she did not go out and seek this extra money from the customer, she would be incurring a loss from her pocket. And so this kind of created a tension between the economic and the social factors or considerations that the agent was in the midst of. Because I'm interested in understanding how her relationships might play out in this situation, I look at two sources of relationships that are common in the literature. One is social similarity. So if agents and customers belong to the same social group, we would expect them to have stronger ties, more trust with each other. And I use, in this context, caste, given that this is India. And then I also use whether they had previous history of interactions. So the more they have interacted in the past, they are more likely to have stronger ties. And kind of the puzzle here is, do we expect that these relationships will help maintain the activity? Like, will we see that these relationships will act as a buffer in the event of this disruption? Or will they actually impede the activity? Will it create more social pressures and expectations and constraints on the agents? So I use a whole range of data here. I'll not go into too much details, but it's a combination of data from the platform, interviews with the stakeholders, and also some administrative data from the Indian government. And I'm using a difference in different style estimation. Again, at a very high level, what essentially I'm trying to do is to compare agents who were more dependent on this affected service as a source of their income and the other agents who were less dependent, to see if they had differential behaviors in response to this change by the firm, and specifically if the response was different based on their relationships with customers. So what do I find? So at a very high level, this is something economic theory would easily predict. The firm makes this change in incentive, which requires agents to do more work. It's a little more expensive for customers. Business falls. No surprise. But what was intriguing was that when you look at the role of relationships, it was the impediment, the balance tipped towards social relationships impeding transaction activity than buffering it. What I mean by that is that agents transacted less with those customers who were from the same caste as them after this change by the firm. So if you see the red line here, this means that there was a bigger decline in the transactions when agents and customers were from the same caste compared to when they were different. Also, there was a bigger decline in the transactions when agents and customers had a history of more interactions before. If they had dealt with each other more before this change, after the change, they transacted less. There was a bigger decline. And interestingly, in more heterogeneous communities, which is where there was more mix of different castes, there was a buffering effect in the sense there was still a drop in transactions, but the more diverse the community was, the fall was less. So in a way to interpret it is that the agents were able to kind of seek out this cost from the customers in more diverse communities. It was easier for them to do that. Now, interestingly, from the firm's perspective, this also had some negative spillovers overall. So of course, there was a decline in the service that they changed the commission for, which is DMT. But there were also negative spillovers on the non-DMT services. And overall, there was a reduction in the number of customers and their earnings, not just from the affected service, but also the unaffected service. And if you focus on this right chart, what this shows is how the agents changed the mix of their business on the platform. So they started shifting from basic services to more discretionary services. There was a big drop in the basic services that customers needed a lot more, and agents started pushing more of the discretionary services that customers needed less of, but that got more income for the agents. Now we might say, why is this happening? Why are the relationships kind of not really helping the agents lean on the customers when they had stronger ties with them? So a few key insights here. Based on my interviews, the things that stood out were that one, the relationships made the transition from this informal social model to a more formal, rigid, and a commercial one more difficult. So before, the transactions were informal, they were flexible. Like one of the agents said that those customers who are willingly, they're happy, they kind of give me money, and I don't really ask them for money, it's kind of a social good. I get my fees from the firm anyways. But afterwards, it was more about trying to reset the expectations. It's setting a new normal. And the stronger relationships they had, the more difficult it was for them to reset those expectations. And it wasn't about, before you had to pay $5, now you have to pay 10. It was about this was earlier something good that you were doing for the community, and now this is becoming a regular transaction. So that's something that agents found more difficult to reset when they had stronger ties. It was also about trade-offs for the agents. So they knew these customers from before, and now people who knew them from before kind of also expected more favorable terms, kind of leaning on these relationships and ties that they had with the agents. And then finally, it also created concerns about trust erosion, because earlier, these agents were glorified community service providers. They were earning this goodwill and trust. They felt good that they were getting recognition in the village, getting the support that they were doing good work for the community. But afterwards, it was more like, it seems like you're trying to make some money in the back pocket. But what are you trying to pull off here? And the agents had to kind of go the extra mile to explain to them that this is not something I'm enforcing, but it's something that the company is making me do. And I think a part of it is also related to the kind of vulnerable populations we are talking about, because these populations usually, the kind of customer segments I'm studying here face higher information asymmetry. They kind of have, on the one hand, they really rely on these relationships, but on the other hand, they kind of switch to the other side very easily when there is a situation which might pose a risk to them. So to wrap it up, the key takeaways for me from the study was that on the one hand, in these contexts, these relationships really make intermediation work for the firms to reach last mile customers. But if the firm makes changes in the incentive structure, strategic changes without taking into account the role of these relationships, then it could also make intermediation break. The firm here made a very knee-jerk change without factoring in how might it create these tensions for the parties involved. The relationships are also contextually dependent, meaning that here you have a situation where the core premise of the interaction is changing from a social, informal basis to a rigid commercial one. And then relationships are making it more difficult to make that adaptation. And then finally, from a digital firm perspective, we usually consider digital firms to be a black box. But what this shows is that when you have a face to a digital firm in these last mile markets, then you need to bring back the social and human considerations because these agents can influence the extent to which the firm scales, who the firm reaches, and what services it might end up providing. So I would love to hear your thoughts and questions, really looking forward to an engaging conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I have no slides, and I will be giving you some kind of witness of what we are doing at Lulu dans ma rue in terms of social connections. But maybe let me tell you what is Lulu dans ma rue, and a good way to present Lulu dans ma rue is to present how I created it 8 years ago. Before creating Lulu dans ma rue, I spent about 10 years within a famous French NGO, which is called Emmaüs, taking care of homeless people. And I was helping homeless people to get back into society through getting a job. And we were actually Emmaüs Défi is the association that I created, was providing jobs to homeless people. And during about 10 years, I was actually experiencing the fact that a lot of homeless people wanted to work in order to get back to a normal social life. They needed to work in order to feel the value that they had. And in the same time, the kind of work that we were providing in our society was find a job in a company. And a lot of homeless people, because of their life, they were not ready to go back into a company. They were not ready to get back into a hierarchical organization with a boss, with very strict rules. And in the same time, they were able, they really had very valuable skills. They know how to fix things, to clean, to build. They had also a lot of social skills. They had gone through a lot of difficulties in their life, and it provided them with a very high sensitivity, and all these social skills were very valuable. So for many years, I was always wondering, how could we invent a new way to provide a job which is more suited to the homeless people? And when we had about 10 years ago the appearance of all the big digital platforms like Uber, Deliveroo, I was actually within HEC at that time. We were discussing, and I was really thinking these digital platforms are really interesting. We are talking about Uberization, and we see this platform being very like a regression compared to all the social wins that our society got. But in reality, these digital platforms were a way to invent a new way of working with independent workers, where the workers on the platform, they choose when they work, they choose the type of mission that they that is provided, and it is a much more flexible way to have access to job. It is also a way to have a job without a boss. And for a lot of homeless people, having a boss is difficult because it ties to authority, to the rule of the father, of the family, and all that is, for a lot of homeless people, quite painful. So providing an environment where you don't have all these rules, this hierarchy was very valuable. So we started to create Lulu dans ma rue with the idea of using this digital platform to create new kind of jobs, which are like the former small jobs where you help people in a daily life by fixing at home something, cleaning, help moving, cardboards, also any kind of small jobs, cooking and all that. And we invented conciergerie, a concept of conciergerie, where you have a concierge which is finding for you within the neighborhood, within the district, some people who will be able to help you in your daily life. So we became a household service provider through a digital platform. And the people who are providing these services are the Lulu, and we call them the Lulu. We have about, today, within Paris, about 1,000 Lulu, who are providing every day hundreds of services. And these Lulu are going at your home, and they help you in your daily life, as I said, cleaning, fixing, helping moving, and so on. All of the Lulu are not former SDF, homeless people. A lot of them, what we found out is, of course, you have people who used to be in the street, who needs to get back into social life, but you have also a lot of people who have very big difficulties getting back to work because of their social status. What we found out, beyond the homeless people, is that you have a lot of people who have an handicap. You have women who are alone, single, and with a family. These mother with kids who live as a single person have very big difficulties to get back to a job because you have constraints. You have to be on time every day at 8 o'clock. You have to be in the factory or in the shop. And when you have kids, it's very difficult. So we found out that there were a lot of other people than initially homeless people who were really in need of much more flexible ways of getting to jobs. And this digital platform was providing this flexibility. So now, out of the 1,000 Lulu working on the platform, we have about half of them are single mothers. We have a lot of people with an handicap. We have a lot also of senior people, so elderly people who have gone through burnouts, who have gone through working within big companies and being washed out by these companies, and they don't want to go back to this company, but they want to keep an activity and be part of the professional life. So we have a big variety of people who are the point in common between all these people is that they are not the perfect, suitable employee, and they need to have different ways of getting to work. So what we found out is that this way of getting back to work, when you choose by yourself, when you work, the type of mission that you take on the digital platform, is a very, very powerful way to get back to work. So actually the rate of success of people arriving on the platform and people getting stabilized and having regular income on the platform and actually being able to live with these revenues is actually very, very impressive, and that is a very big success. And the first thing that we did is we went to see the government and we created a law a new legislation which actually provided Lulu dans ma rue more subsidies in order to help us better coach and better support all these people who are right now out of the job market. So, and these subsidies represent right now about 30% of our revenues. 70% of the revenues are actually coming from the business itself. So we have advertising, and we provide on the platform about 5 million euro of business on household service providing, cleaning, fixing, and all that, as I said. And this is 70% of our business. What we are right now still in search of is our break-even point. We are still not positive on the break-even point, so we are hopefully this year we will get on the break-even. And what is very important to say is, when we look at our business model, we have these two kind of revenues: the revenue from the business, the revenue from the subsidies for our social impact. But when we look at that, we could think that the value of the project of Lulu dans ma rue is based on the service that we provide, and also the social value that we have for helping people getting back on the job market. But what we found out is actually that there is also something else which we cannot measure right now, which is some kind of still difficult to assess and to evaluate, is the value that we provide with the social connections. Because when we talk to the Lulu, it is very, very impressive to see that all the service that they provide, when they talk about it, it provides to them a lot of self-esteem, because every day when they go at homes, they get this social connection, they get this interactivity with people. And when we ask to our customers, when we do surveys, what they value is, of course, they like Lulu dans ma rue because it was a solution which was very easy to activate. It's very, they get the app, or they go on the internet and they get a Lulu within 24 hours or 48 hours. So it's very easy to activate, it's safe, it's secure. But when we ask them what they value, is also the fact that it is the service was provided by somebody from the district, somebody who took time to arrive to discuss. When we do surveys, what we find out is also that a lot of the Lulus, they get offered a coffee. When you ask the Lulu, and a lot of them, as I said, were people who were seen as people being excluded from the job market. A lot of these people have very low esteem. They tend to be evaluated as people not productive, not efficient enough. When they are with the customers at home, when they help them in their daily life, they feel so powerful. They feel that they help, and for them it is really a change makers. And what we found out is, within our program of coaching for this Lulu, we are not measuring right now the impact of this social connection, and it is not valued by the government, and it is not valued by the cities. And actually, so what I am not coming today with data, because I think what my problem with Lulu dans ma rue, I am not coming with a demonstration, I am coming with a challenge, with a question, is that right now we are not able to measure this social connection. And I am deeply convinced that Lulu dans ma rue, the value of Lulu dans ma rue is also in the level of interaction that we are recreating within the district. And we are not able to value that from an economical standpoint. And the problem is that I am sure that if I were able, if we would find a way to measure the value that we create with the social connection, it would be for Lulu dans ma rue also a new way to add a new business model to our project. We would get the revenue from the service that we provide. We would get the revenue from the state because of all the work that we do for getting people back on the job market. But I am sure that cities, the mayor of the cities are actually right now having a very big concern about the disappearance of these social connections, and they would be ready to pay for projects that are actually fostering this social connection. Lulu dans ma rue, when I talk about Lulu dans ma rue, we are being demanded in many, many cities in France. We are based in Paris, in Lyon, in Lille, so only 3 cities. But if we were able to provide a kind of measurement to these cities on saying, we will help you to foster your social connection, your feeling of trust within the district, within your cities, it would be for us also a new way to develop and to have a third kind of revenue within our model. But right now, one of the big difficulties is that there is no accepted, well-established measurement of how we measure these social connections, and this is, I think, a big challenge. We are discussing. I would love with HEC to get to this kind of new way of measurement, and that's why I'm here this morning. Thank you.
So I hope you enjoyed the first session, and as you understood, this was not a coincidence. There's a real red thread across the 3 presentations about the power of social connections. We saw it at the macro level, how social connections could be a way of improving trust, interpersonal trust, and life satisfaction. We saw it through your presentation about how when businesses ignore social connections, how certain changes can actually backfire. And then we saw it through your presentation, again, a kind of wake-up call, like how can we make this actually monetizable, visible, such that beautiful projects like Lulu can actually grow and survive. So without further ado, I would like to invite you all for questions. Let's have maybe 2 rounds of questions, and let's collect like 3 in one go, and then have you guys respond. Is that okay? Yeah? Please.
Thank you very much for all the presentations. I have a question for you, Jan, because as you can observe, there are a lot of women in this room. So I was wondering if you observed any different conclusion regarding gender.
Yes, we do find some differences in terms of, so women are much more trusting, but there's if I give you, I think that the difference is even more striking when you combine the gender difference with the generation difference. There is really something new which is happening right now, is the fact that young women are much less satisfied in life compared to young male. So it's, but they are much more trusting than compared to young males. And actually, it has really big consequences precisely in terms of vision of the society or ideological values. Young women are becoming more and more progressive, while young males are becoming more and more conservative. So it's a new puzzle, a new generational divide. There are some explanation that could go back to the number of challenges that young women have to face. The fact also that after the Me Too expression, there has been really an awareness much more pronounced about sexual harassment and things like that. But when you look now at the voting behavior, both in the US, young females have voted for Kamala Harris precisely because of this. They are really unsatisfied with life, but they are progressive and on, while the young male have voted, but in a vast majority, for Trump. And this is exactly the same thing when you look at the breakdown of the vote, for instance, at AfD in Germany. There has been like something like a 20 percentage point divide in the vote between young female and young men for AfD. And same thing for le Rassemblement National in France.
Hello, I'm Hong Nguyen from Iraq Business School. I have a question for Jacques-Edouard Vincent. I really like the idea of your business model, providing jobs for homeless people. I have two small questions. First, why do you know that they need your help? And the second question is, often homeless people are migrants or refugees who don't have any paper allowing them for working properly. The problem in France is that you have to wait for years for some papers like that to work. How a company like yours can handle this very big challenge? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, we don't have only homeless people within Lulu dans ma rue. Actually, it's a minority. Most of Lulu are people no more in the street. As I said, single mother, people with an handicap. But still, we have a few of them who are homeless. So why do they need our help to get a job? That's a good question. We are just, I think, a way for them to, first of all, have access to the market. Just by yourself, you can find customers and provide your services, but it's not easy. And actually, the value of digital markets is actually to make the access to market easier, and actually to structure it and make it safe for customers and also service providers. So that's what we are doing. And also, a lot of homeless people, and maybe this is more with my Emmaus experience, are actually people with a lot of psychological difficulties also. They have been suffering. When you live in the street, it's very destructive for you in terms of self-esteem, in terms of getting social relationships, getting limits. And actually, we are just here to help to get back, to help them get back into what are the rules that you have to get in to have a professional relationship and being able to keep it. So our role is just to coach people get back to learning how to have a safe and long-term professional relationship. With the problem of migrants, that's a very good point. Actually, we are providing, we can accept people who are actually legally accepted in France, those with papers. We cannot have on our platform people without papers. So we are actually, part of our social work is also to help those who have papers that just for 1 year or for a temporary period, we help these people to have access to actually a longer period of time being able. So we support them from an administrative standpoint. But you're right, we cannot help people who are without papers, and that's really a shame.
Good morning. My question is for Jan. I have the feeling that Japan has suffered from a long-term lack of social connections in the country, and at the same time, it suffers from a long-term economic crisis. Did you study the connection for this country in particular?
Thanks for your question. So I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in each country, and so I don't want to say dumb things and stupid things about Japan. I'm really not familiar with this country. We do know that obviously when we talk about this kind of general trend, there might be a lot of heterogeneity depending on the country. But I think you know much more than me about this.
So, hi. So my question is for Aparajita. Did I say your name right? Yeah. So my name is Lourdes, and I work at the European Institute of Cooperation and Development. And so congrats on finishing your PhD. I know what that feels like, so I'm glad that you're there. Great. And I think it was very interesting, your research, because we have this big project in Madagascar, and we are working with the Economic Development Board of Madagascar with female entrepreneurs, and we're creating this social incubator. And the idea is that we want to connect women with the services that they provide to register their businesses, because that's a huge thing. In Madagascar, it's so big and people are so scattered that we don't know how to get them to the services that the government provides. But there's also this is a project that we're doing with the Agence Française de Développement, so we have money for whatever number of years, but then this idea of what are we going to do once the money runs out? What is the kind of economic model behind? Do we get agents? Like when you started talking about agents, I was like, yes, this is great, but then how do we do it? Because I think that when there's an economic interest behind, like the platform that wants to make money, the economic thing is like, yes, of course, we need to make money. But when it's a social project, when money is more, we're waiting for subsidies, we're waiting for donations, and money is not there anymore, sadly. So we have to go through economic models. So I'd love to, I don't know if you have something for us. I know that you don't have the answer, but I think do you think your project is going to help also maybe social, like people like me who are in social development, think about economic models? How could we do it? Help.
Well, thank you. That's really a big picture question, but a very intriguing one. So I think two things that I can say at this point of time, and I'd love to continue the conversation. So one, based on what I have seen, not just here in this particular project, but also just very broadly as I've worked in similar research, allied research topics, is that that the model has to be such, which is, and it's easier said than done, that it's self-sustaining in the sense that if you put agents in between, then the agents and the community kind of you take it to a point that it's kind of a self-fulfilling, reinforcing cycle. And both the parties, like agents and the customers, see the value in continuing that, so that tomorrow, if you were to kind of move from a social to an economic model, it doesn't suddenly break things apart. And I think I wouldn't say like this particular firm is one case. Maybe they could have done things differently, or maybe transition from a social to an economic model in a more phased manner than trying to do in a knee-jerk reaction. Also setting those expectations from the beginning that that this is not just, this is not a charity. This is, of course, we are doing this for your good, but we want to do this in the long term, and it's important that we also stay in the game. So I think my realization was that there was also a lot of matter of good communication and taking the people along and setting the expectations along, in the right manner, which plays an important role. I think the second thing that I'll say is that something I did not touch upon in this presentation was the relationship between the firm and the agents. So as such, there is like duality. The agent is sitting in between. She has her community that she's serving. These relationships are important, but then the firm and the agent also have certain kind of relations. And what is the firm doing to invest in that? How does the agent view the firm? Does she see them outside, like an outsider? And tomorrow, if they change something, she would rather work in the interest of her immediate community rather than in the interest of the firm. So I think these are two immediate things that come to my mind about factors that help in such models become more sustainable. But as I said, the question that you raise is a very, very, very big picture question. I'd love to talk more about it.
Hi, Aparajita. My question was also directed to you. I'm Aikya. I'm also from India, alumnus of HEC. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, when you say before and after, what was the timeline of it, of the research? And also, what really led to that trend? What do you think was it a policy level shift which kind of incentivized firms to move towards more profit? But also, what I want to ask you is, in your research, did you also look towards, given the context and economic context of India today, like, was that profit of the firms leading to kind of more inequality in the society, or was it also going reinvested back into having more agents and creating more jobs in the society? So what purpose did it solve in that sense in terms of job creation versus rising inequality, rising distrust, and so on?
Thank you for your question. IKEA? Thank you. So you asked a few different things. So I think the first one was, what was the timeline before and after? So the timeline of this study was 18 months. So I look at, the pre-period is 6 months, but I look at 1 year after the change. But also I've been in touch with the organization, so I know that things haven't kind of really looked up even beyond the 1 year time frame. You asked about what led to the policy change. Was that the second question? Right. Yeah, so this is one firm data that I showed, but for this firm in particular, so in general, very broadly, especially firms which are in their early stages, it's very common for firms to initially prioritize growth, scale, invest, and then shift to profits, and especially in these markets where if it's a new entrant and trust is low in these low income settings, rural areas, they want to first emphasize growth before they start monetizing. So that was, in a way, for this firm, that it was almost like a point in their life cycle where they felt they wanted to get the return on their investment. They also had a set of impact investors kind of asking them, okay, when is it that you're going to show us this is not a charity, like not an NGO, this is a social enterprise. So I think that was the decision point for the firm. In terms of what purpose it served, I think it's an intriguing question. So on the one hand, I feel it's like this trade-off between growth, scale, and profitability that firms often face. So on the one hand, if you look at the unit economics of the firm, by doing this change, yes, they were better off. But then at the kind of scale of impact shrunk by a significant amount after this change. So over a period of time, hopefully, they should be able to like you said, put this money back into maybe, what I know of the last is that they were trying to bring in new services so that the agents' lost income could be recovered. But it is kind of difficult balance from the firm's perspective as well, because on the one hand, suddenly there's a big drop in the number of customers, number of agents, but then the unit economics is better than what it was before.
Okay. My name is Kenya Guimarães, and I'm a PhD student. I also did my master's here at OHSP. I'm originally from Brazil, but I grew up partially in the US and also in Europe. When I look at sustainability, I have worked in many parts of the world, and when I look at social connections, sustainability, I clearly see a difference between the Global South and the Global North and its demands, and how we can learn from each other to really try to sustain countries that are really struggling with other issues. So my question is for all of you. I came a little bit late, so I apologize. Do you have any specific models in terms of best practice or examples that you can use that could be highlighted? For instance, regarding homeless people, I lived in Washington, D.C. and New York before when I lived in the U.S., and one of the critical issues sometimes to employ people, it's many mental health issues, drug addiction issues, and liability regarding that. So I know the rules in Europe is a little bit different, but I would like to know how do you think this could be addressed, as well as if you have any concrete examples of best practice. Thank you.
It's a tough question. First of all, just to be very clear on Lulu dans ma rue, we have a few homeless people, but we cannot take any risk having homeless people going to provide services at home. So we are very, very careful of we do not take homeless people who are not ready. So we coach them, we train them. We have also a whole set. We have a service client, a kind of call center, tracking all the services, and so really the customers are expecting from us a safe place, and they are relying on us. So it's our job to make sure that everything is okay, and for people that we feel are too fragile, too unstable, we are not putting them on the platform. We are still training them, and sometimes we are saying, well, okay, we are not suited for you, and it's not okay. Just to make that clear. In terms of is there a difference between Global South and Global North? I don't know. But what I can witness, what is interesting, my experience with Lulu dans ma rue, is actually to see that there was a difference between initially what I imagined, what I was dreaming of when I created Lulu dans ma rue. There was this kind of dream, a little bit of nostalgic dream. I wanted to reinvent the small job that used to exist in our society decades ago. This society that, from an imaginary standpoint, we imagine with a strong social connection, everybody knows each other, you live in your district, and you help each other. And there was this kind of dream at the heart of Lulu dans ma rue, saying, well, let's try to reinvent that within a new age, which is our era, and that's what I was trying to do, reinvent this small job in the digital age. Okay. what I found out is actually a lot of customers, when we launch Lulu dans ma rue, they love this story. They love the story of reinventing social connection, getting back to la vie de quartier, and actually we implemented a kiosk. We have a kiosk within Paris where we have concierge and they are open to anybody, and actually the kiosk itself is a shop which is very interesting because it is a shop where we are selling the services, but you don't have to get in the house or the shop. It is, you are in the street, you are talking and you are in the street. And from a city standpoint, it's very interesting because you have people, a little crowd around the kiosk, and people see that there is a group of people and they are getting there. And so there is this, on one way, there is this kind of dream of this a society where you have a lot of connections. And the reality, which is when people are ordering services on the platform, they expect an 100% reliable service at low price with 100% guarantee, and you get reimbursed if it's not perfect. And there is this kind of difference, I would almost say paradox, between what people are dreaming of and in reality what they are actually expecting. And I think that the difference between our former society, where you had all this connection, and today is the level of expectation which has been set by the standards of Amazon, of all the companies. There is a very, very, very high standards of quality. You get, you have your product within 24 hours, you don't like it, you resend it, all that is for free from a feeling standpoint. And actually this, in terms of the behaviors of the people, now when you are ordering a service on the platform Lulu, you expect being a 100% satisfied customer. And when you are trying to tie that with getting back to social connection, making the job with the people who are able to do it, and people are imperfect, you have a kind of paradox. So people are dreaming and they love the story of the social connection, of the district, of the quartier. And in the same time, they are extremely demanding and they will prefer to have a service provider who is coming from 50 kilometers away and doing the right job, rather than a local service provider who is doing maybe a 10% less good service. So it's not, I'm not answering your question, I'm just sharing my own experience in terms of paradox within the behavior of the society.
Thank you, Marike. I'm Thomas. I have a small question for Jan. I come back to your graph linking interpersonal trust and life satisfaction to. So I did not understand if it's actual vote or opinion, political opinions. And the next question is, have you tested whether there is a connection between life satisfaction, personal trust, and the actual propension to go and vote, and in what direction it goes?
Thank you. So if you don't mind, I will answer also to different questions, because I went back just regarding the last figure for Japan, and there's and more generally when we are talking about global south, global north, in terms of this evolution of social connectedness and life satisfaction. So there's one thing: if you go to Brazil, Costa Rica, and things, life satisfaction is declining in many continents, but I mean the most pronounced is really in our Western European countries and in the US. This is not something, so you might find things in sub-Saharan Africa, for sure. But when you look at Brazil, and especially Costa Rica, and all those countries, actually life satisfaction is really high. And it's really related, so there's in this World Happiness Report, there is a chapter on this, really showing how precisely social connection and so on plays a big role in those countries. And it goes back to Japan, so I'm not an expert in Japan, but there are two things that are really striking. Is the first, the fact that especially when you look at the youth in Japan, the level of anxiety has increased a lot for two main reasons. So I don't know exactly what's happening in terms of social relationship. You are more an expert than me. But there are two things for the youth in Japan. The first one is that, yes, the fact that there has been an enduring slowdown in economic growth is something that depressed them. And you will find exactly the same thing for our young generation in France, in other. When you compare the youth in France, Italy, Germany, compared to the youth in Eastern European countries, there is a big gap. I told you that there is a reversal of this U-shape by age, but it's not the case in Eastern Europe. You go to Poland, you go to Romania. I mean, the young Romanians are much happier compared to the young French. Why? Because there's this hype of an horizon. Economic growth at some point, I don't know that economic growth is a positive thing per se, but also in terms of horizon, the fact that you have the feeling that you will be better off compared to your parents. I mean, this is something that really, in terms of the mindset, which is really important. And in Japan, the fact that they have, like in France, that there will be a kind of declassement, and the fact, on top of that, that you need the anxiety in a high school, that you need to compete, to be is really, really important in this country. So Japan, for the young generation, is a really tough country in terms of life satisfaction and anxiety. And then going back to the figure, I'm sorry for this delay. So yes, this is actual voting. And then, but this is an excellent point. What you see, there's a big difference in Western European countries and in the US in how you can partition people's behavior in terms of life satisfaction and generalized trust. In Western European countries, they still vote to a certain extent. So they the vast majority will express their anti-system votes and things like that. What is really striking in the US is that you have all these lonely redneck who used to work in General Motors and things like that. They've voted for the vast majority for Trump in 2016. But this is not the main electorate in 2024. Why? Because in 2024, he managed to capture even people in the upper class, but who feel lonely to a certain extent, and who are feeling more and more intolerant. But the real lonely guys in the US no longer vote. And this is really the death of despair of Deaton. He has wonderful work on how they become on drugs, alcoholic, and they are becoming invisible in the society. And they are representing more than 50%. And you know that almost 50% do not show up in the voting to vote in the US. So this is the big difference between Europe and the US.
We're out of time. I think it's time for a coffee. So I want to maybe, first of all, thank you all for the wonderful presentation. And I just want to say that in this room, there's at least 20 professors, scholars, and practitioners, non-academics, who are acting on the question of how to create ties, how to leverage ties, what actions companies can take, social organizations can take. So know that this is a true topic, very present in this audience. So I hope we can connect more around the topic, and you guys really kicked us off. So thanks again, and join us for a coffee.